but that is not the case. Oh, I'm excited. What, they put it there just to have it out of the way, or?
No, that's where Anna and Rita want it on permanent, on display for the next week.
Fabulous.
We got the same.
It looks very good. It's right by the left side if you're facing the sanctuary, right opposite where the whole display for Rabbi Dan is.
Okay, I will go look after. All right, we're gonna get started. Let's let in, Ron, do you want to let in who's in the waiting room?
Everybody is in the waiting room. The only person that was in the waiting room before was Judith.
Okay, she probably will come back on. Okay, good afternoon. So just a reminder for those who are here and those online, next week's class, we're going to take a tour of the antiquities that the Beiners donated to Temple Bethel, supplemented with Judith's knowledge. It's really nice. So what I wanted to do today is take a pause button and just reflect on Jewish art, antiquities, and the concept of museum. So where were your let's go back 100 years ago, 110 years ago, where was your family living? Like whatever generation that would have been great-grandparents or great-great.
Austria.
Okay, so Western Europe. Mine were in Russia and Poland. Where were your family 110 years ago? Russia, Poland.
Hungary.
Russia, Poland, France.
Russia, Poland, France. Same. And Judith, 100 years ago.
They were in America.
America. So you're like.
My grandparents were in America.
How many generations American do you go back?
My grandparents emigrated from Romania at the beginning of the 20th century.
Okay. So, all right. So if you think about it, our Western European Jews definitely had it better, quote unquote. They didn't during the Holocaust, but in the 1890s, a lot of culture, if you know Klimt at all,
Yes.
the lady in gold who's from Vienna, he was very patronized in a good way, by the Jewish community. And a lot of the arts in Western Europe were supported by the Jewish community. That doesn't mean there wasn't anti-Semitism. The Dreyfus affair is happening at the time where Albert Dreyfus is falsely accused of being a traitor. Zola writes a strict editorial accused, later retracts it, but by then there's so much anti-Semitism. Theodor Herzl, a journalist, watches this happening and says there's got to be a different place, whether it's all the Jews convert to Christianity, whether all the Jews go to Uganda, or whether all the Jews settle in the biblical land of Israel, which is he's the father of modern Zionism. He traveled there, he never went there. That's in Western Europe, where Herzl could be a journalist, Dreyfus could be in the army, although there was anti-Semitism. So it was, I guess, Jews could be more part of society at large, or there was still anti-Semitism. In Eastern Europe, where I'm from, and anyone who said, so you have both, you have Western Europe and Eastern Europe, because you have France.
Actually, my grandparents arrived in the late 1800s.
Okay, to America?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's early too, right?
Yeah.
So in Eastern Europe, it's a very different situation. And it's, we know from our own families that they left to come probably to America. So though some went to, whether it was Turkish Ottoman Empire or British Mandate Palestine. But for every 2,000 or 3,000 Jews that went to British Mandate Palestine or Turkish Ottoman Empire, what is now Israel, 20 to 30,000 went to America. So that's why the numbers are so different here. Even Golda Meir, who I hold up as kind of like the, for me, a model of like of Jewish history. She's from Russia, experienced pogroms as a child. If you saw the movie, she refers to it. The family went to Milwaukee. They came to America, like our parents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents. And then she went to Denver, but they got involved in Zionistic activities that ultimately went to Israel. So American Jews 110, 20 years ago didn't have leisure, right? Especially in Eastern Europe, where you're literally like trying to live and stay alive. On top of that, in general, America didn't have leisure. Remember, children, there weren't child labor laws until the industrialization of the city, and it still took a while. So kids laboring, you hear the stories of, sometimes I'll do a funeral and someone like started to work at like 12 because dad died and they had to go to work. You hear these stories, it's not allowed today. So even the concept of, I don't know, I have to look, so even the concept of museum, and I'll see if it'll focus in, and this book is a history of museum. Really, the only very first museums that are in America are only coming around about 120 years ago, 1896. So and they started more in Judith's realm. They started in the realm of archaeology and displaying archaeology. But Jews, who are many not here yet in this country, did not have the leisure to go to museums. No. They couldn't do it because they were just busy staying alive. And it also wasn't even fathomed. I even think about, like, in my childhood, we hardly ate out, and it was a big celebration, it was a big occasion, right? And I don't think there were so many restaurants or things that go around. I think just for what, like, I think I order almost every meal for anyone from either a restaurant or a delivery or something. There's just more there. Same thing with museums. There's no museums existing in like a full body way in America. You have, of course, Europe, which has a greater history of displaying art. Europe is also much older. America is only 200 and, is it 50 years old then it's like 150, 200 years old. It's a much newer nation. Now in Europe, art until like the 1700s, 1800s was really by a patron, right? Or for the church. A lot of it was for the church to educate the masses who could read, but a lot of it was like, a patron would pay an artist to paint something and an amount of money, and they would create it. So it wasn't like organic or like, oh, this flower is so pretty, I'm going to paint it. There just wasn't freedom of mind, and there wasn't freedom of time to do that. Like if you were an artist, you were being paid. Mm-hmm. Now, once you get to the 1800s, you have more and more artists who are painting what's coming from their heart. You're now post-Renaissance, so you have more freedom of expression that's there, you have enlightenment. And in Europe, the way they I don't know if you've ever seen like galleries in Europe, I'll pull up a picture. There are tons of, if they keep it this way, is it the National Gallery or the Victoria and Albert? There's a museum in England that keeps it the way art was displayed in the 1850s, 1860s, where you just, like, imagine this whole wall or whatever wall's in front of you, just covered with pieces, with very ornate frames, right? Those kind of ornate gold frames, but just tons of pieces. And they would have salons and people would come in and look. And anytime anything dramatic happened, what is dramatic in the art world 150 years ago?
Napoleon.
Well, Napoleon, that's historically, yes.
Somebody painting something scandalous.
Okay, so scandalous topic wise, and who said it here? Impressionist, what Susan said. So imagine the artist, which up until really, there wasn't abstract art, and there probably was, but it wasn't like mainstream. And then all of a sudden you have Monet with the fuzzies, and you have Van Gogh with the choppy lines, and you have Seurat with pointillism and the dots. And I was at Art Basel this week. There was an amazing, did anybody go? Did you see the Lego? There was like €1 million, it's called €1 million, a wall of Legos. I'll see if I can pull it up on my, it was ironically made in Europe, but it was Washington crossing the Delaware, all out of Legos. I'll see if I can pull it up. So you have all of a sudden, and there was big drama when those things happened. Now, Picasso's kind of the best example, because Picasso, we think of those choppy, kind of jagged figures, or puts a boob here and an arm here, or whatever he does. But if you look at early Picasso, all these artists could paint realistically very well. If you look at early Picasso, early Chagall, like there's much more realism, but they were just inspired by a way to differentiate their art. And also there was just more freedom. So that's kind of the way art. So as time goes on, instead of these, wealthy patrons paying an artist like Rembrandt or Raphael or Michelangelo, right, or the church is paying, and it's a more limited amount of people. Now you have way more people creating art, and as leisure comes to America, right? So if you jump from when your grandparents got here or your great-grandparents got here to your generation, you know, you might have had more leisure in your childhood than your great-grandparents had, and your children and grandchildren certainly have more leisure than we did, including, and also technology, right? For good or badly of this, you can tour any museum that has their collection online. So the museum, in some ways, I think had its heyday for like the last 150 years. I'm not sure going forward. I'm a museum goer, but you think, like, when I ask some people about going or viewing art, you would think I asked them to cut off their left arm. Like, some people just hate it, and I think part of what we can do and why I love Jewish art is if you can say to someone, fine, you think you hate art, well, but you like being Jewish, I'm gonna find art that synthesizes Judaism and gives you a way to view it. But this is only even a newer conversation in the Jewish world, because we were like just trying to live and not be killed and not die. We haven't done a good job of that because we're in a war now, again, not for trying, not for not trying. But so the idea of like a visit to a museum, or even being allowed into a city to visit a museum, is like a newer concept, right? So you have Jewish art in the realm of what Judith is doing, which is antiquities, or if you visit tile floors, mosaics in Israel, and then you have modern Jewish artists, some who hid, like Camille Pissarro was Jewish, but hid his Jewish identity. Modigliani was very influenced by African culture. Chagall was more blatant in his Jewish expression. And then you have people in the middle, like Rembrandt, who we're going to look at a piece about him, who did have comfort with the Jewish community, but also carried out stereotypes too. So you have like kind of this range and gamut of Jewish art. The other thing that's really important to remember about Jewish art is people always say there's not a lot of Jewish artists because of no graven image, but there have been Jewish arts. If you like Judith's Antiquities, someone doesn't just make a piece of pottery, they put a design on it. Someone just doesn't make a mosaic floor, they put the binding of Isaac on it, as they do in Beit Alpha Synagogue in Tile. And so there have always been art. And it so happens our online people have beautiful pieces behind them. Madeline and Judith both have gorgeous pieces behind them. Dory?
Question, antiquities, when you're looking at some of the stuff, it'll say, and I don't know that much, but this was one of my questions. It'll say, found somewhere in Israel by the tribe whose God name is Yahweh, and I'm sitting there going, well, that means there is Israeli, were they called Judeans, were they called Israelis? They'll never say this is Israeli or I mean, I don't think we were called Jews until we left Israel, right?
Right.
So my question is, what time period is that, and she would know, what time period is it where the piece of art or the clay, whatever, bowl, or they'll say, this is from the tribe that called themselves, who believed in the God Yahweh. And I'm saying, like,
Where have you seen that here, Judith? Go.
Can I sort
Please.
of elucidate on that? First of all, we know pretty clearly, I guess, were you at last week's lecture?
no, I couldn't make it.
Okay, well, I went through, at least, I didn't have time to finish, but I went through the early periods. We know based on style, we also know based on where the piece was found, what period the piece is from. So we know that we have a Neolithic, Chalcolithic, Iron Age, which is the, Bronze Age, which begins the age of patriarchs, and then Iron Age. So we clearly know, and there were Jews, the word Jews were starting to be used. The late Babylonian exiles started to use the term, but we can label pretty clearly where a piece, when a piece was produced.
Right, and your question confused me a little because Judith's, like the world of antiquities doesn't name things by Jewish periods, it names it by secular periods, like Iron Age, Bronze Age,
No, but
Paleolithic.
there
I
are,
don't know what you're,
no,
I don't know what you're talking.
like, for instance, let's say you found something in Babylonia, right, which is Babylonia,
Persia.
so think that's, no,
Iran.
Iraq. Iraq is Babylon, okay, so it'll say Babylonian, I'm using like a, Egypt, Nefertiti, or, Egyptian Nefertiti, okay, and I'll say, okay, Egyptian. But the stuff, I don't know where I was reading it from, but it'll show like something, a bowl, maybe it could be a statue of something, and they'll say, from the tribe or from the people who believed in the God Yahweh.
That sounds more like
Yahweh.
political correctness, because there's, what's her name, Dara Horn tells the story of the Anne Frank house, which, until it was corrected, the yarmulke, but also when, it was, like, they put a country, like, the Torah in English has an American flag, the Torah in French has a French flag, and for the Torah in Hebrew, they didn't have an Israeli flag. Ironically, at the Anne Frank house, so it sounds like a political correctness, like, I don't wanna get too
No, I think
distracted.
it's-
I'm gonna keep going, but when Judith is here in person,
Okay,
if you can find an example,
I will.
then bring it up and ask her. Okay, I wanted to share with you, because it's really not, such an expanded upon thing, the concept of modern Jewish art and Jewish art in general. So I lived in London in the early 90s, and there's a center called the Barbican. It's like an art center in England. I didn't realize at the time how important it was, and I don't know if it's been assembled since then, but there was a huge exhibit collection of Jewish art, which I don't think has ever been duplicated in America to the same degree, called From Chagall to Kitai, which looked at Jewish artists, many of whom you didn't know. It was a humongous collection. And so that contemplation of how do you gather, so I want us to like sit in a space of questioning what is Jewish art, and we're going to look at a couple things, but before we do that, let's just fill in a little information. So in this article, I love this first quote: being a Jew is like walking in the wind or swimming. You are touched at all points and conscious everywhere. I don't know if you, like, I just find that just, my sister has like a train sound for her text messages. I'm like, I think of the Holocaust when I hear the train sound. Like, I don't know if you have things where like, oh, or this war has been very triggering for people. And just like all the time, that you're thinking about Jewish things, right? It's just like the way, there's no other way to. Now, I would argue that there's some, as you get less, if you grow up in a home which says less Judaism, you might not relate. Like your grandsons versus my stepdaughters had hardly anything. So I don't think they walk around conscious everywhere. I think Joey does, because he's been raised in a much more traditional, Jewish way. So part of that is also an evolution of time, because if the last 150 years looked one way, right? Then the next 150 years might be very different, not just for Jewish art, but for being Jewish. Go ahead.
My question is this, what is the definition of Jewish art?
So
It can
it's,
be done by
that's-
somebody who's not
right.
Jewish, but it's about.
so it's open. That's exactly the question. I'm gonna show you that. I'm gonna show you different Jewish art that you could all call Jewish, and it's all right and it's all wrong. Like there's no concrete specific definition, but that's why I wanted to just share a little bit of this article, because it gets into that question. So just from here, general historiographical problems concerning the assessment of Jewish art form the subject of a 1999 anthology. The first segment considers biases of the field of art history against the very notion of Jewish art, in part due to the widespread misimpression that the Second Commandment prohibited Jews from making pictorial images. This is a big issue. Who's the gatekeeper in the art world, right? Like, who do you think of when you think of art and Christie's and galleries? Who decides what's valuable? Oftentimes, it's just the nature, white Christians. Like, it's just who's been in those positions, right? It's the same, the best example I can give that parallels this is, there was a Jewish demographer who was accused of harassing women. And he had a lot of women working for him. So the question is their research good? Because if they were like on edge from being harassed by him, was their reporting and their work environment, did it really make it like correct or right? Was it the right? And it's the same thing here. Jewish art, if you have like an anti-Semitic culture or a very secular, very Christian, or very elite, right, white especially, culture, judging what's art and what's not, you can't even like get in the door. We didn't come on a Mayflower, most of us, right? We're not we're not Buffys, you know, we're Maureen's and, you know, or Mildred's. And so, Millie, yeah, already who's deciding? So, Margaret, this gets to the crux of your question, like, who's even letting Jewish art be Jewish? Because if they're anti-Semitic or don't care about it, then on top of that, the idea, which I think is misinterpreted, no graven images, one of the reasons there wasn't so much Jewish art, not only because of our history, and, you know, if you're fleeing and running, you can bring your brain, you can't bring your Mona Lisa, right? It's much harder to flee with the Mona Lisa than with your brain. So, and that was the Jewish reality, but also, different events also informed, so like Holocaust, there's art that comes out of that, if you remember that self-portrait that I showed you the first day of Felix with his self-identity card, Dory, yes.
Well, like until 1000, we lived in Islamic countries.
Well,
So
from,
have
well,
no
Islam
graven
didn't start
art
till
too.
600, so 600 to 1000. Yes, there's a lot of
So,
beautiful.
you know, where you live also kind of dictates, if no one else is making graven images, you probably aren't either.
Well,
Like, if you live in
no, but there are
Morocco-
beautiful floors and mosaics,
Right.
so they did exist. On top of that, like this just is something that Jews don't hate art, that part of it was their reality of having to run and travel. Part of it was we've always been the people of the book. We've taught our people to read, which wasn't happening in the Christian world, the same way, partly because there were so many more, and it was just the nature of the time. So we didn't need paintings like these or these stained glass. We didn't need this to explain Abraham walking with strangers or Ruth and Naomi, because we could read it, right? Now this is modern, this is, I know, I think it's 70s style, but it's made in the 2000s, right? But you didn't need that to be able to, you could go read that story and be just fine. This is just a beautiful interpretation of the story. Yes, Margaret. Or Anita.
The question of what is Jewish art is extremely difficult. Take Chagall, for example, is a Jewish person, and much of his art is very Jewish, okay? But then he did commissions for churches, and he also has very famous paintings where he shows Christ on the cross wearing a talit.
Right.
Is this Jewish
So
art?
here's the thing, let go of the question. Let go, just swim in the sea of art. Don't get so hung up on, that's, my point today is I'm gonna show you different things that you could call or not call Jewish art. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter if it's Jewish art or not. We're gonna explore. All right, so I'll start, because this is like, you wanna get to like the crux of this? I'm gonna show you this. And that's the thing, like, don't get so hung up on if there's Jewish art or not. Just like be open to it all. So this is like horrible, but this is, you know, this is the image I wanted to start with for this very reason, because it's such a vexing question. So has anybody seen this?
Yes.
What is it? Do you know what it is?
Can't see.
Yeah, they made it's just recent, and it's Jesus, I forgot what it was. The forward had a whole thing about it.
I'm so impressed. Okay,
Wait a minute.
you are right.
Just.
I know what
I'm
you're,
forgetting
you're
what it
very
was.
good.
It was the whole story,
Yes.
tell us, I forgot.
Yeah. So we're gonna dig into a little more, Barbie, because, okay, someone said it looks like a fingerprint. Just initial reactions, I'm gonna make it bigger. It's writing, Hebrew script, okay, but there are some numbers here as well. There's an 8, if my cursor will show. It might not. There's an 8 here. There's an 8 here. That's gonna be 8 AM.
Where?
The 8 is, I'm wiggling it around, it's hard because it's black and white. There's a number 8 here. So it's written in the middle.
The middle.
I don't, if I turn this, that
It's in
doesn't,
the middle,
right,
right?
right.
A date.
Okay, it's 8 AM is a time. There's a date as well. Okay? So this is Let me just get to the next, because Margaret's right, she knows what it is.
I can't remember.
No, it'll come to mind. Okay,
A diary.
what happened?
Is it the day, like
Yes.
October 7th?
Yes, so what happened is this artist, who's actually friends with a congregant, she was in, let me just share this. She was at home, like many people were, and they were rushed to rooms, and she was in her shelter, and she's an artist, so she was in her shelter. But then, people run to shelters a lot in Israel. It's I've run to shelters in Israel. It's more normal, but October 7th was different in that the terrorists came into the shelters. They attacked the shelters, and the army didn't come for a long time. And so this artist was in her shelter. She realized things were getting worse. And the kibbutz where she lives has a WhatsApp chat. How many of you are in WhatsApp groups? With family or friends, with the clergy? What happens is she took, and that's where the 8 starts, in the center, while she was in hiding, these are all the texts. Oh, I'm not sharing, sorry. This is what the WhatsApp group, Margaret, does it sound familiar now?
I'm waiting because I can't remember what it is.
So it's the WhatsApp group
Shows you how to
text,
get over it.
right, it's the WhatsApp, it's of what happened that
Oh,
day,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And she took those, it's awful, it's just awful. So she took this WhatsApp, so if you look, like imagine, or if you have a long text trail on your phone, if you don't have that, and she took, let me go back to the picture. She took that, wait, I'm stopping sharing, sorry. She took that and made this, which now the kibbutz is selling, or she's selling.
You can't see it.
I'm gonna share it,
So
sorry.
it's Kibbutz Radio, the one that was most.
Yeah,
And so what hours did it go, from 8 AM to when?
I am not sure.
The English translation is there.
Where?
Wasn't that, those?
Oh, those were the texts, yes, I can look at when the last text is, sure,
Periods.
sure, I
Can
can
you
look,
bring it bigger?
yeah.
That is
So
so
that's,
cool.
so those of you who are like hung up on what is Jewish art,
Well, that
is this Jewish art?
certainly is. And Jewish poetry and all of that.
Is poetry, is it art?
Yes.
Do you see how you just have to be kind of open? This is not a beautiful setting that she created this, and yet it's the most I want it.
We should never forget.
Because we should never
Because we should never
forget,
forget.
and I can't believe someone had the wherewithal. You want me to go back to the time?
And how much it looks like a fingerprint, like this.
I know, you said that,
Oh,
yeah, which is really,
Yes, it's just imprinted in our soul now.
right, so Anita, does that fit what you want Jewish art to be? Or Margaret, who were questioning what Jewish
Well,
art?
the question, what I was going to say is that Jewish art is not just because somebody who's Jewish and painted it. It could be about a Jewish subject. It could be anyone who paints something that might be relative to something Jewish.
3 hours.
Doesn't have to be a Jewish artist. And then I think it's more about the subject than it is who painted it. That's an opinion.
Well, that's the thing, do you see how it's fluid, so do you talk about, so in this case, every it goes back to that trilling quote, this is the end, just because you were asking, 11, 12 Bravo heroes, which is a beautiful way, which some people means some people
So I think
live.
Jewish art is different than Jewish artists. They're two different.
Right.
I think, again, I think once you try and define it, you get messed up. The Alan Berger, who's a professor at, FAU, Holocaust Studies professor, wrote an article about, the amazing adventures of Cavalier and Clay, I think it's Chabon, which is a great book if you haven't read it. And in the book, it's about comic books, but in the background are 2 Holocaust survivors. And Alan Berger's critique of the book is that if you're a Jewish writer writing about the Holocaust, you have to put the Holocaust front and center. It was only background. And we got in like a little bit, we had him come speak, and it was a little bit of an argument, because like, who is he to tell a writer where to put the Holocaust? Not, but he, whether it's as an academic, he has to, you know, find something that's unique and special, or if he really believes. So I think once you try to kind of push a definition, that's when you get hung up. And I would rather not define and just sit, and that's what I'm gonna put in front of you today. So let's go back to this. Put in front of you today, different approaches to Jewish art and see what you think. So what makes, in your mind, let's share this again. What makes this Jewish? Just yell it out.
It's Hebrew writing.
Hebrew writing,
Subject matter.
subject matter. So it's a terrorist attack, a woman in a safe room in Israel, living in a kibbutz that's on the border with Gaza.
Jewish artist.
Jewish in that.
The artist was Jewish,
I mean, it's really.
okay? Why would a Jew or anyone, why would anyone buy this? You said earlier to remember, to never forget.
And it's also very creative.
It's very creative, right? That someone had the
Yes.
wear, can you imagine like being attacked by terrorists and have the wherewithal
We can't
to
forget.
do this? Like, oh my
It's a
God,
way to never
I
forget.
never forget. And where does the fingerprint come in? Because two of you said it looks like a
Love that.
fingerprint,
Isn't it?
right? Every fingerprint is different.
Right.
You could jump with that and say in Judaism, to save a life is to save the world, to destroy a life is to destroy the world. How many lives were destroyed on October 7th? It's like a reminder, everyone's different, everyone matters.
And also, what a fingerprint is, it's your identity.
Yes.
It's your unique identity.
Right.
And the fact that they're using a fingerprint is very meaningful.
Right. And that question, one second, that question of identity is really powerful because, you know, often people see the Jews or the Palestinians or Hamas. Well, Hamas is its own thing, and we generalize and we don't kind of go person. The Times of Israel is trying to go person by person through 1,200 people, giving you the story, the people who died on the day. Go ahead. Was that Judith or Madeline?
Yeah, no, it's me. You can buy, this is not Jewish, but it is the same idea because we have one. You buy an American flag with the names of every person who was killed on 9/11. And they are sold, they are huge, they are all over the place. And this is the same thing. This is the Jewish, almost the Jewish version of that. Because it's remember, I am going to remember, I am going to be part of history. And to me, this is the visual representation of history. The way those 9/11 flags with everybody's name on them is.
That's very powerful. You said, so I have that flag, actually, Dan has it. And I wrote an article that year on the I think it was the 20th anniversary. My brother died of 9/11 related cancer, but 19 years after 9/11. And I wrote about that flag and how it meant something to me different before he died and after he died. Yeah, so that's very powerful, right? So it's also spitting things. So in the same way, Judith's pointing out, you know, to have that vision. And I think that's part of what's so special about artists. Like, I'm not an artist. Maddie's not here, but she's an artist. I don't know if anyone else is an artist. To have that wherewithal to just synthesize and make out of a million Legos, this Washington crossing the Delaware pull up, or being in, I think, like that an artist under attack goes to this, or, you know, someone who makes flags puts the names of all those who died in 9/11 on a flag. That's part of what I was like, the first lesson was like, think differently. Remember I showed you monk on the beach, and then I put rabbi on the beach, and then if you take a self-portrait as Felix Nussbaum took a self-portrait or made a self-portrait, like that's part of art, is imagining the context of art is, and also taking things out. That's harder with this, but if you have, we'll look at some other pieces. If you take something out, what do you see? Any more comments on this, right? So I'm kind of introducing this idea that Jewish art is more complex. And if we stick ourselves to defining Jewish art, then we're gonna leave someone or something out. And I just don't get hung up on it. I can't speak for the art world. I don't know, in the antiquities world, Jewish, what is the potency of, Judith, what is the,
Well,
Oh,
you,
see that.
it's, don't forget, and as we'll see, a lot of the pieces that we're going to see next week are if we say Jewish art is quote unquote biblical, if we start relating the pieces to the times of Abraham, Isaac, David, and Solomon and the temple, then we have a connection with the Bible. But you're going to see a lot of pieces that are Chalcolithic, early
Right.
bronze. These had nothing to do with the Jewish religion at all.
Right.
Um,
right, there's
So,
pieces that existed before.
so
Also,
archaeology, you have to kind of say biblical archaeology as opposed to pre-biblical archaeology. Nonetheless, it is the history of the Holy Land. It is the history of, whether you call it Palestine or Israel, it is all the timeline that leads us through the destruction of the first temple, the second temple, and then our diaspora. And then it
that's
just
Jewish
goes
art,
on.
right? So then because if Judaism didn't even exist, but it's found in the land of Israel, and geography matters too. So America, we're so new, even though there's people that have been here in Israel, there's not enough money and time and people, there's tells all over Israel that are there that still need to be dug up. That's just not the reality in some parts, although then you hear of a dinosaur bone being found or something. So it's, part of it is locale, part of it is culture too, right? Like there's some cultures where art and expression of art is not even allowed. So you're not gonna have anything, or if you're gonna have something. So I wanna kind of, again, I'm trying to like make you, I'm trying to confuse you more about Jewish art. And one of the most confusing people is Rembrandt. I wanna just, because it's so powerful that, because a lot of people who painted Jews did not love Jews. And there's something about Rembrandt, and Bialik noticed this hundreds of years after Rembrandt, the art of Rembrandt, Bialik was a Jewish poet, Bialik noted that this gifted genius has miraculously grasped and seized the core of the Hebrew soul, like no other Gentile painter has ever succeeded to do. Now, what is that? What does capturing the core of the Hebrew soul look like? Who knows, right? So I want to just analyze, I want to just point some things out about, before we look at this piece in particular, some features of Rembrandt and the way that he paints. Before we get to the features, I meant more. So first of all, the remarkable ability that Rembrandt and Da Vinci had this too, to create haze and fog. It's not like Seurat where it's impression, but look, this is one face, and yet look how many, and again, it'd be nice to see the original, but look how many tones of skin, and even the blushing of the cheek that's there, or the eyes, the way the eyes are, the realism that is, and yet you know that it's a painting, or the way he plays with light, or the juxtaposition. Remember we talked about color? So the juxtaposition of the brown against the yellow, and you can even tell material, like what is this? Fur, and what is this? Brocade, like some sort of brocade or something like that. So just, I don't wanna like jump into the Jewishness of this. This is, now someone said a big nose, but this is actually Rembrandt's self-portrait.
Oh, really?
Yes, yes. So, but he did put Jewish topics. So this famous painting is known as the Jewish Bride. This would be hashtag me too today for sure, right? With the hand on her lady parts. So this is known as the Jewish Bride, which means that someone was either, there was some Jew that was wealthy enough to pay him to do this, or that was interesting enough a subject. If you think of your limit, it's not like today where you can go to the store and buy paints. Paint was very expensive, very valuable, right? That was there. You see that it's not a happy scene, right? People often didn't marry for love at this time, and you see a lot of miserable brides in paintings. There's a great, I forget who does it, right? There's a great painting of a bride who just looks miserable, right? Now, there's Jews at least at the time, but then there's the expulsion of Jewish people. But this is a Jew in the community. A lot of Jews were doctors at the time. Why? Because you can carry your brain with you. If you are fleeing, and this is why Maimonides is a famous doctor too. Maimonides is like 500, 600 years earlier. Jews, banking, money you can take, like that's why also the church prohibited Christians often from banking. Money was portable, real estate was not. Your brain and all the knowledge here is portable, your paintings are not. So Jews might have gone into certain professions because of the mobility of being able to move. So this is a Dutch physician, Jewish physician, who is from this period of time. There's nothing really remarkably that stands out as Jewish. I mean, Rembrandt's, someone said the nose, I think Rembrandt's nose is bigger than the Jewish doctor's nose.
What's that called, the Jewish?
It's called Portrait of a Man, Dr. Ephraim Bueno.
We know he's Jewish.
He's Jewish. Amsterdam was a very comfortable place at times for Jewish people. And this might have even been Rembrandt's physician. Like this is the physician that served him. This, we looked at the first class, the Binding of Isaac, that's here. And some people say that this face is a self-portrait of Rembrandt. That artists sometimes did that. They put their faces in them, because it's Bible, we weren't there, so you can decide to put anybody's face there, right? And so this is like, Christians also read, the Torah, they call it part of the Old Testament. So this is a familiar story that's going to be familiar to Jews and non-Jews. But Abraham is the father of Judaism, so he is choosing a Jewish moment. I would say this painting is not good for the Jews, right? Is it good for the Jews? That's always like a question, like John Stewart or someone will ask, but it's very violent, right? But, it's, and a lot of people say that, that they substitute like Jesus for Isaac in that story. A lot of people do that at Passover too, as well. That doesn't mean that Rembrandt was doing that. And then this, I think I've seen that. I've seen the David one. This is Moses breaking the tablets, and he painted this in 1659. There's a great David. We're just trying to, I don't know what, let me stop sharing and then make it smaller so you can see it better. Now, again, Rembrandt might not have said, oh, this is a Jewish topic. He's just painting, a story that appeals to Jews and Christians and Muslims. You've heard the term Musa? That's Moses in Arabic.
What is Musa?
Musa is Moses in Arabic. So it's a story that's familiar to Jews and
You can't see the picture.
here, I'm coming back. I'm trying to make it smaller so it'll fit in the screen. Right now, so again, is this Jewish art? We said that the woman in hiding, her art was Jewish. And you said, because it's in Hebrew before you said she's Jewish. So there's Hebrew here. Does that make it Jewish art?
Yes.
Yes or no? I mean, that's the thing, like.
It could be argued either way.
Right, exactly. You see, that's why you don't wanna define it because, and obviously, I don't know how good his Hebrew was, but maybe someone helped him with the Hebrew. That's there, that's, in.
We copied it.
Yeah, or he copied it. Yeah, good point. Actually, that's a really good point.
Which brings an
Because he was
interesting
thinking-
point. One of the reasons that Jews were doctors was because we were literate. And we-
Literate and needed to often flee.
Lady.
And, This is another one, Jews in the synagogue. And it's so funny because if you go, especially like a more traditional, more Orthodox synagogue, if you go, there are often people chatting, chit-chat. We have more decorum in a reform setting, but if you conservative, I don't go as much, but Orthodox, like there's always chit-chatting going on. There's some people praying. So you see,
Know that.
you see,
True.
this is an etching by Rembrandt. And you see there's some praying in prayer shawls, some facing away, and some totally on the outside that are there. So it was present enough and prevalent enough that so see, I'm trying to like throw curveballs at the concept of Jewish art. And then of course, I'm sorry I don't have women today, but who comes up, of course, is Chagall. So I want to show you, this is Chagall. Marc Chagall is definitely a complicated figure. He was not a good husband at all. He was not a good father at all. Whether it matters to you or not. But he was a brilliant artist. He, like many others, had to leave the place of his birth in order to find safety in a new land. And I'm just gonna read.
He was really culturally Jewish. He wasn't really religious. He was more cultural.
Well, I would argue any boy growing up in Russia is having a Jewish childhood.
Right.
Whatever they did with the rest of their life,
Yeah.
they're having a Jewish childhood.
Just as an aside,
You know what?
Benny, just as an aside about Jewish art or Jewish intellectuals during the Holocaust. If you haven't seen the movie, it's on Netflix, I think, Transatlantic.
No.
Oh my God.
It's good.
Transatlantic, what's it about?
Transatlantic,
Yeah, it's a
it's about,
series.
I think his name is Nathan Fry. It's about this Jewish
Varian
organization.
Fry.
Varian
Fry. Oh, I love
in Marseille.
Yeah,
All
Varian
these
Fry.
intellectuals from Eastern Europe, all over Europe.
Yeah, you say that.
He saved them. It's a true story. The benefactor was a non-Jewish woman
Yeah.
from the United
He was
States.
odd too. Did they get into him?
Oh, yes, very.
Because
odd.
he
He's
like
gay.
wanted to be
He's
a,
gay.
well, that is not odd, but that, he wanted to be a celebrity, like he kind of only saved famous people,
Well,
like,
enslaved intellectuals.
yeah,
That-
but
that's
they were,
what-
right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it's a must,
Transatlantic.
transatlantic. It is
Okay.
a must.
Yeah, Varian
must
Fry.
watch it again.
Yeah,
It's a
I've
must.
studied him, but I don't know about that. It's
And-
one movie or a series?
It's maybe, I think it's one movie.
Okay, well, that's
But
fabulous to know.
it's
Varian
Max
Fry.
Ernst and Chagall and all these intellectuals.
Yes.
Writers and artists that he saved through Marseille. It
Fabulous.
is,
Did you say it was on Netflix?
I'll tell you in a minute.
Okay,
It's a
so
must.
while you're looking that up,
It's a
this
must.
is, so when the Chagall windows were dedicated, Chagall, at Hebrew University, Chagall gave a speech. I'm just looking for my,
Netflix.
okay.
Another one.
So on February 6, 1962, Marc Chagall stood in the synagogue at Hadassah Hospital and breathed, and gave a brief speech. And I love this, and I've quoted this beginning a lot. How is it that the air and earth of Besk, my birthplace, and thousands of years of exile find themselves mingled in the air and the earth of Jerusalem? And that's the crux of geography, right? Like, I'm a New Yorker, I live in Florida, but I will never give up my New York identity because I love it, but I'm also resonating with Israel right now. Like, I'm here, but I'm not here. And so many of us live that way. And even Americans, I would argue, we're much more transient culture, right? You're from Boston, you're from New York. Where are you? Massachusetts, yeah.
Rabbi Dan once said to me, because I love Boston sports teams, he said, Lech Lecha, you live in Florida. I said, listen, I don't have to be diplomatic. You can't take the Brotherhood down to the Dolphins game and cheer for Washington. So, but yeah, no, absolutely.
Right.
I love all parts of me.
So,
Yeah.
so what, and that gets again back to that trilling quote. I'm just looking for the George, the Lego piece. So getting back to what was said earlier, where you grew up matters, and I think you see that in Chagall, whatever his religious identity was or not. I found the Chagall, so I'm gonna not the
There's
Chagall,
almost no-
the Lego.
There's almost no Chagall picture that you can look at that doesn't have Jewish symbolism. The lamb, the dove, and pictures of, even if they're minuscule, of the best. He carried that with him throughout his entire life.
Even in the
Judith, do you have your hand
Even in
up?
the churches, yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
You look at the.
go ahead.
I just wanted to add, because Chagall is kind of this moves. This is obviously done in glass, we haven't looked, we haven't taken, the three-dimensional, what is Jewish art? It's not only two-dimensional. You have 15th century Haggadot, that are absolutely worth a fortune when they're sold at, that's Jewish art. You have Chanukiot and menorahs that are sold again at Sotheby's for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And those are clearly Jewish art. So I think when we talk about it, we have to go on a spectrum for pieces that depict Jews or depict our history, all the way to pieces that are clearly done by us and for us, and include this whole range of Judaica in the topic. I mean, there's just so much. Sotheby's does auctions of Judaica and auctions of contemporary Jewish artists. They have catalogs
Yes.
specifically.
So let me just read quick. So, and Chagall even gets into this question. How could I have thought that not only my hands with their colors would direct me in my work, but that the poor hands of my parents and others still with their mute lips and closed eyes who gathered and whispered behind me. I mean, this imagery of people who aren't there, but there, right, would direct me to take part of my life. I feel too as though tragic and heroic resistance movements in the ghettos, and your war here in this country, Turkey, to Israel, because it doesn't live in Israel, reblended in my flowers and beasts and my fiery colors. The more our age refuses to see the full face of the universe and restricts its sights to a tiny fraction of its skin, the more anxious I become when I consider the universe in its eternal rhythm. So he's asking for a wokeness, for an opening up, and the more I wish to oppose the general current. Do I speak like this with the advance of life? He's older, though he lived till 97. The outlines surrounding us become clearer and the horizon, whoops, go away. The horizon of, oh, where'd you go? Sorry. Hold on. The horizon of religious art. He gets into this very question of art. Wait, why are you not? Okay, sorry. Enlarging and shrinking. He's even struggling with it, right? Religious art. He's like, he says it kind of in quotes, which means like he's not totally thrilled with it. Religious art I created while bearing in mind the great and ancient creations of the surrounding Semitic people. My hope is that I hereby extend my hand to seekers of cultures, to poets, and to artists among the neighboring peoples. I've concluded 2 years of labor creating these 12 stained glass windows for the synagogue in Jerusalem. My hope is that the synagogue will please you and that it will overflow with harmony, even as I have prayed. I saw the hills of Sodom and the Negev, which now you're getting into the outlying areas. You're not just talking about Jerusalem, you're talking about the far reaches, which is very political, right? Out of those who defies appear the shadow of our prophets in their yellowish garments, the color of dry bread. I heard their ancient words. Have they not truly and justly shown in their words how to behave on this earth and by what ideal to live? I draw hope and encouragement from thinking that my humble work will remain in your land, in their land, in your land. That's there. That's a rare opportunity. I'm just going to show you a couple of Chagall's just because so you can look at, we've been referring to like the imagery that's in his stuff. Go back to the beginning. But
look what he goes on to say in the rest of that article, Rabbi. It was in New York and it was in Paris and people lined up.
Yes. I think I saw them in it. So these are the windows, and they're the 12, the reason they're 12 windows is for the 12 tribes. And that's actually where we are exactly in the Torah right now. The glass is hard. I mean, the other thing that's remarkable about these artists, even like Da Vinci and Rembrandt and all that, is the different mediums they use. Woodcuts and etchings. So here's Adam and Eve. I'm looking for more blatantly, a lot of, well, is this the one with the fiddler on it?
Beautiful woodcut book.
Yeah.
Jewish.
This is a man and woman in bed, angels. kind of old villages.
It's like this in that picture on the right, the lamb.
Yes. You know, a blatantly Jewish,
And a dove.
a blatantly Jewish character holding a Torah, very Jewish. I think it's an angel. You know,
Oh, yes.
So it kind of looks like a dove at this thing.
And,
yeah, a dovish angel, that's a great,
and
yeah.
always in the background, the place of his birth.
Yes, which is kind of what he's saying, like it's always, always with me. Sorry. I just want to find, I don't know if white crucifixion is here. I mean, this is literally Sabbath. This is his early work. This is like 1910. Right? You see how his style evolves.
It's humorous.
Look at the candles. You know, look at, it's just incredible.
That's his parents, right?
What?
That's his parents, right? I've seen that one a couple of times.
Here's a
Think about it,
self-portrait.
it's
Do you know he had 7 fingers? I just learned this today. Chagall had 7 fingers on his left hand. I just learned this, yes.
called polydactyly.
That's a portrait. What is it called?
Polydactyly.
Polydactyly, yeah.
Oh.
So that's that. Here, this is a famous one. Pretty early. So you have a lot of, so like, right, like who was saying, like Anita said, the imagery, like, even though he's living somewhere else, the imagery of home and that concept of home, and the best that town he referred to, and the farming culture, remember, like a lot of we were farmers, right? And, it's funny, there's a green face. It said that Esther had a green face. I don't know if that's, Esther here or not. But it's Esther apparently, like it says, there's one thing that says that she had a face that was green. All right, and then you have fruit and growing, you know, maybe that's future that's symbolizing, but the childhood, the childhood, is always there. Let me just look towards the end if there's any, sorry, that's there. Okay, I'm gonna share with you and then we'll end, because I promised. The 900,000 euro Lego that was at Art Basel, at the part of Art Basel I was at, because I know there's different parts. So let me, I just came.
Look at this, somebody
So
said.
Transatlantic is on Netflix and it's 7 episodes.
Oh, thank you. Oh, wow, that's
It's on
great.
Netflix, it's 7 episodes.
That's really
Netflix.
900,000 pieces or something.
This is
Read
like-
it, somebody, it's a note.
Yeah.
It's a-
That's what she's looking for.
It's just, what is this with?
Lego.
Oh, this one also is,
Yeah.
another, you know, survival of.
Oh, wow.
Very good.
That's great. Here, let me just show you.
Project that is so.
What is it? Wow.
It's
What is that?
an hour and a half.
Another Lego. So this is,
That was
just because like you talk about art,
100,000.
so this is, just to give you a sense of height,
Legos.
so this is a person. This is a person.
What's
Here, that's a person, so you see the height on the left, where my cursor is at the
Oh,
person.
yeah.
So this is all Legos. And it's Washington President Deli, and it's, I asked him, it's 900,000 euros, it can be yours, I don't even know
How
if
many pieces do you know?
I don't know, but let me show you, I took a close-up, of it. Now, if a Jew did it, is it Jewish art? I mean, that's the thing, that's where you get into this. So you don't wanna be limited, you never wanna be limited, and that's one of the beautiful things about art, is that, you can be in that space. Here's a close-up of, it's kind of like, do you know Chuck Close's work? Where
Yes.
yeah, it's like from afar, it looks one way.
Yes. It's better to stand back.
Yes. It's Legos.
Wow.
And then you go back. There's one face. And then let me just share the,
Were Legos the patron of this piece of art?
No, I don't think so. Because they would get the 100,000, but they're, no, the artist gets.
Who owns
100,000.
Legos? Is it a Jewish company? Is it?
Right, does that make it Jewish? Does that make it Jewish? Here it is.
Yeah.
That big again. And again, just for scale, here's a person. So it comes, so it goes that much higher. Okay, Ron, thank you, our awesome producer. Want to thank everyone for being here. Judith will be with us in person next week. We'll view the collection and go from there. All right, thank you, everyone. It was that.